Good morning, everyone. We invite you to come in and find a seat. We're about to start. Glad that you're here with us this morning on this special day. Today is Harding Appreciation Day, and as our special guest, we have the president of Harding University, Dr. Bruce McLarty, and also with us is Liz Howell from Harding, who is working with Dr. McLarty, and over in the ministry center with our teens is Ben Trimmy, who works in the admissions department. And we are excited to have them all with us today, and we are genuinely excited to be in here to hear a presentation from Dr. McLarty. Now, he tells me that will be a presentation about the university, be interactive, and so if you have questions, I'm sure he'd be glad to answer those. I'm opening him up for that anyway. I don't know if he appreciates that or not, but so we've been planning for this day for a while, and as we've mentioned to you, we're doing it because Harding obviously is our neighbor, but Harding also has contributed much to the kingdom and much to the kingdom here at Levy. We have many Harding alumni that worship with us, and regularly, and this is what's impressed me since I've been the minister here, regularly we have young couples who will come here from Harding University and plug in. And they have become a central part of our congregation and ministry and the good work that's being done, and we really are blessed by them. And it just seems every year more young couples come, young people come, and they say, well, we just graduated from Harding and we're moving down in the Little Rock area to work, and they really do go to work in our congregation. So we appreciate that. We appreciate what they stand for in terms of Christian education and all of that means in our world today. So we're delighted to have Dr. McLarty. Now, I asked him about an introduction, and he was very modest and just said he's been the president of Harding for 4.5 years, and before that, the preacher at the college church for about 14. Liz Howell. Liz, raise your hand. Now, what's your official title, Liz? Vice President of Alumni Parent Relations. So if you're a parent of an alumni or an alumni, see Liz, right? But Liz has been very good as a point person, and she sent me a long bio. I won't go through that. I think Dr. McLarty's known and he's respected, and so we're just glad that he's here. If you come on up, we'll pray together and turn it over to you. Father, we are thankful that we're here this morning, and we're glad that Dr. McLarty and Liz and Ben are here. We just give you glory for the good work of the university and what they mean to our region, what they mean to our state and to our world. Bless Dr. McLarty and his work there, and we're thankful that we can share this time together. In Christ we pray. Amen. Amen.
Okay, is this on now? Yeah, okay. Just keep talking, okay. Thank you. A preacher never hears that, but that's, I already like this place. This is great. So good to be here this morning, and I'll say more about it when we get together for the time of worship together. But this is a novel thing. I don't know that you realize this, but it's a novel thing for a church to contact us and say, we'd like to have a Harding Appreciation Day. It sounds a little weird if we call somebody and say, would y'all have a day to appreciate us? So it's a novel thing, and it's a great idea, and may your tribe increase. This is a great honor for us, and for us to be able to come here and in a Bible class time to talk about what it is that we do that so many of you have been a part of in the past, and also for us to sort of make the case for Christian higher education. Just sort of a footnote kind of to start things out with today and everything. We love what we do, and we believe passionately in it. And Liz and I and the people that work at Harding, we just think it's the happiest place and just one of the great ministries in the world, and we delight in that. But I don't want anything that I say today in any way to be seen as a put down of secular education, because a lot of you got your degrees from public schools, and I admire that. My parents did. There's a lot of good going on with Christian students in public education. There's a lot of good going on with Christians teaching in public education. And I affirm you in that, and I admire that, and I hope that nothing I say in any way is seen as a put down of that. So maybe that didn't have to be said, but I want to say it at the very beginning as we get started. And now to kind of launch into what we're doing, I want to say just a little bit of something of kind of the theoretical background of what we're doing at Harding, maybe give you a few things by way of update, and then I'd love to just sort of open the floor and let you ask questions about things you might be curious about with Harding University, because I find that a lot of times as a speaker you can spend a lot of time answering questions that people aren't asking. And if you just have the question that they really want to know about, it helps you so much getting down the road. One thing is we have a good time at Harding University, and I need to say that because McLarty and Party never went together until they put it on a T-shirt together. My first year as president, and there were T-shirts that said McLarty Party, and my wife gave me kind of a hard time about that. She said, "Never seen that before." When I first became president, they made a video to sort of introduce to the Harding constituency, the alumni base, 60,000, nationwide, 60,000 alumni. And who is this guy, Bruce McLarty? So they made a video, and the videographer they hired came from Washington, D.C. Didn't have a background in Christian education, but he had married a Harding alumna. And so he came down to Harding, and he did all these interviews, and he's a great videographer. And he came down, and he puts all of this together, and he has a script for what we're about. And in the script, we talked a lot about the mission of the school, God at the center of all that we do. We talked a lot about the impact of the school, all of those sorts of things. And when he goes back home and he has the script put together, and he's a great writer, and his wife reads it, and she said, "It's all right. Everything you said is true and accurate." But she said, "I remember Harding was a whole lot of fun, and there's no fun in this script." And so that was sort of a reminder to me early on that one of the things I need to say is that in the midst of it all, we have a really good time. We've had a Harding Read the last 2 years, a book that we give to all of our incoming freshmen. We encourage everybody on campus to read. This year it's The Hiding Place, that deals with the Ten Boom sisters and what they went through during World War II. The one we had last year was a book called Amazing Grace by Eric Metaxas. And it's the story of William Wilberforce and the 20-year struggle to abolish the slave trade in the British Empire. And it was, Wilberforce has always been a hero of mine. I wanted the students to be introduced to this and all that. So last year it was all about Amazing Grace and William Wilberforce. I got the idea that maybe I had said a little too much about it when one day a guy on Twitter says, "My goal in life is to someday find someone who will love me as much as Dr. McLarty loves William Wilberforce." And I thought that was kind of a cute comment and all. I went home and told my wife, and she said, "Me too." So we have a great time on campus. I want to tell you a story that relates to somebody we had with an American Studies speaker about a year and a half ago, as kind of the way to launch into this and to field your questions. You see the way I keep you thinking about that? You know, I want to know what your questions are and all. I want to begin with the text from Matthew chapter 22, where the text says that when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered themselves together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" In verse 37, he says to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets." And that's what we believe Christian higher education is all about, is that it is loving God with all of our heart, soul, and our mind. And emphasis there on the life of the mind, and that what we do academically is done to the glory of God. Now, the speaker I want to tell you about is a guy named Wes Moore. Has anybody read a book called The Other Wes Moore? Have you ever heard of that? Okay. It's an excellent book. He came and spoke as an American Studies speaker at Harding a few years ago. And Wes Moore grew up on the mean streets of Baltimore, inner city Baltimore, and also a part of his time in the Bronx. So some of the roughest neighborhoods in the world. He is an African American, probably a 40-ish, and is one of the great voices in education in this country today. I heard him in Chicago a few years ago speaking at the Higher Learning Commission's convention, which is our accrediting organization, and it accredits people through this part of the country, and universities like University of Arkansas, all the schools in Arkansas that are accredited, and Ohio State and Notre Dame, and all those through the middle part of the country. Well, he was up there speaking one day, and I'll tell you what it was he said that just sort of grabbed me that day. But his story, the reason that he wrote the book, The Other Wes Moore, is that he grew up, as I said, on the mean streets in a fatherless home, the mean streets of the Bronx in Baltimore. He had great, wonderful grandparents who had their house paid for, and they took out a mortgage on it against that house to pull him out of what he was doing and to send him to a private school that he hated. But it turned his life around. And he ends up going to Johns Hopkins. He goes into the military. He becomes a Rhodes Scholar, studies in England, comes back. He is a White House Fellow and is mentored for a couple of years by Condoleezza Rice. You can't put a resume together any better than that. And so that he is now an educator, and he's a voice that we ought to be listening to, because he has a great concern about people who grow up like he did. And the reason he wrote the book was that while the story is being told about this superstar, Rhodes Scholar, a decorated veteran in the armed forces, and now somebody who is a White House Fellow and all of these things, and while that story is being told above the fold on the front page of the Baltimore Sun newspaper, there is another story about another young man who grew up on those same mean streets in a fatherless home and was the subject of a 12-day manhunt because of a robbery and a murder. And the story is being told about Wes Moore and about the other Wes Moore. And so the Wes Moore that was such a great success was kind of intrigued and troubled by what he saw. And so the other guy is in prison, and this Wes Moore feels compelled because we share a name. It's kind of like I am with McLarty Autos. I have no connection with those people whatsoever, but I write them a letter every now and then, just to say, we got a name in common. But the Wes Moore writes a letter to the other Wes Moore in prison. And what he expected was to get something back maybe that was written in crayon or something. He expected something to be dripping with hate and barely legible. And what he got was one of the most articulate letters, he says, he's ever read in his life. And the two men connected. And they spent a lot of hours talking about their growing up and how is it that one of them is serving life without parole and one of them is speaking to the Higher Learning Commission. And we need to find out, we need to figure out what that is and save the next generation. And so that's where the book, The Other Wes Moore, came from. So that's why he's speaking to us. And when he spoke that day in Chicago at the Higher Learning Commission, we gave him a standing ovation. He was inspirational. I remember Larry Long, our provost at the time, turns immediately to me and he said, I think he's an ASI speaker. And so the American Studies program at Harding, we did bring him in about a year later. But then in the Q&A that day, here's what he said. He just, in response to some question, he turns to us, and it's a room full of educators, probably about 1,000 provosts and about 1,000 presidents. And he says to us, he said, you do realize that higher education is not just about what you learn, but it's also about who you learn from and who you learn with. And I could not write that down fast enough. And I thought, that sounds like something generated by the PR office at Harding University. You know, that was just perfectly a description of why we believe what we do is so important. Higher education is not just what you learn, but it's also who you learn from and who you learn with. And for the last 2.5 years, as we've traveled around and doing Harding receptions, that's been my outline, just like it is this morning. That's my outline. And I talk about higher education does involve what you learn. It is about getting a good education. And a good liberal arts-based education like Harding is not just to train young men and women for their first job. It's to train them for their last job and every job in between. And it's to train them in an economy where we're told today that the average high schooler coming out these days is probably going to have 9 different careers. Not 9 different jobs, 9 different careers. And the technology for 5 of those 9 has yet to be developed. So what we're doing is training people for jobs that don't even exist right now, but jobs that they're going to have to grow into and with a lifetime of learning. So we're not just training people to be qualified employees for their first job, but for every job that they're going to have through the course of a lifetime. Higher education is about what you learn. It's a really important thing. At Harding, we have over 100 different majors. We have 7 different colleges on campus, but we have 100 different majors. And every one of those majors, I can say without any hesitation, every one of those majors I hear from alumni as we travel around. And people tell me, I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it at all, that at the time, that I was getting a world-class education at a school in the middle of a rural state in the South. That Harding University, that when you go up and you head to one of the Ivy League schools, they always confuse us with Harvard. And some of our graduates don't correct people when they say that. But a few years ago, we had a speaker at a graduation who went up and did his MBA at Harvard Business School. And he came back and his message to our graduates at graduation is, he said, I came back to tell you folks, you got the goods. You're ready. He said, I went to do my MBA at Harvard. First day in class, everybody introduces themselves, and everybody's from all these Ivy League schools. And I say, I'm from Harding University, and they'd never heard of it. Some of them had never heard of Arkansas, but they just didn't know about Harding at all. And he said, I'm sitting there in class thinking, what have I done? I have messed up. And they're going to find out real quickly just that I don't belong here. He said by the end of the first week, they were already put into working teams and all of this, and his team had already selected him to be the chairman of the team because he had learned things in Searcy, Arkansas that none of the others had learned, getting degrees that cost them probably 5 times more than the degree he had. And he came back to say, listen, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You've got the goods. Harding is fully accredited. All of our individual programs that need accreditation, those are accredited across the board. I feel like I spend half of my time talking to accreditation committees. But what you learn is important. One last thing on that. My first year as president, we went up and had a reception in Bentonville, Arkansas, and we went to Walmart's corporate headquarters. That day, I talked to 5 executive VPs of Walmart corporate, and they all said the same thing. It was like they had gotten together and had a preparation meeting, and they got together and said the same thing. And what they said was, we love your graduates. They're well-trained. We put them in a cohort, maybe 12 in finance or 12 in marketing or 12 in sustainability, and we put them together, and where we're gathering people from all over the country, but the Harding kids always go to the top of the cohorts. They're just incredibly well prepared. And then it was like they were reading off of a card and they turned it over, because all 5 that day, all 5 said, and they are trained in character. And that meant a whole lot at the corporate level. And they are trained in character. So what you learned is really important, and we believe that. And we don't believe Christian education is education light. We believe it is education plus. And we believe, for reasons that I'll talk about in the sermon today, we believe it's something that involves challenging the best thinking in all of the world. So, higher education is what you learn. It's also who you learn from. One of the fundamental things that every parent needs to know about their son or daughter going to college is that the people who stand in front of the room are going to become their heroes. Now, there will be some they don't like, but there are going to be some they're going to look to and say, that's my model. I want to be where she is. I want to be like him. These people know the field that I love, and they're ahead of me in this thing, and I look at them and I see in them how I get from here to where I want to be in life. Our teachers become our models and become our heroes. And one of the important things for Christian higher education is the person at the front of the class is someone who loves the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind. And so when people are admiring their teachers and they're wanting to be like their teachers, they're looking at someone that you want them to model after. It is who you learn from. A few years ago, there was a teacher, he's Ken Cameron, who is a PhD in psychology, teaches in our psychology department at Harding. And he was speaking in chapel one day, and he was talking about the transition from undergraduate to his graduate education. So he'd gone to Harding, and he'd had wonderful experience, and then he went to graduate education in psychology, which is one of the most brutal fields toward faith in the whole landscape of higher education. Psychology tends to be very anti-belief, anti-faith. So he's going through a program, and he said there was one day in class where at the end of the day he realized he had been asked questions he didn't have answers to, and he just felt beat up. And that night he was deeply troubled in his spirit, and he thought, I know I've got to work through this, and I know I've got to find the answers to the things, the challenges that were presented today. And then he had this thought. He thought, I know I got to do that, but there's not enough time before class tomorrow. But I know that Don England and Neil Pryor know this stuff, and they've been challenged in these ways. Now, some of you know those names. Don England taught about 3 generations at Harding organic chemistry. If you were going to med school, you had to make it through Don England's class. He was, a world-renowned scientist. Neil Pryor, an incredible Bible teacher, and had most of the Bible by memory in his mind, a memory that was absolutely phenomenal. People at Harding would come back to homecoming 30 years later, and Neil Pryor would always say, I know you. And he would say, you sat right over there on the 3rd row, the 2nd seat back, and the scary thing was he knew what you made. And after all that time. But Neil Pryor was a brilliant, brilliant mind, passed away several years ago now. But he said in graduate school, dealing with these issues in the field of psychology, he said, but I know that Don England and Neil Pryor have encountered these questions, and they believe. And tonight, that's enough. Tonight, I can say my prayers and put my head on my pillow, and I can't lean on them the rest of my life. But tonight, they're going to get me through this. It's who you learn from. Who are your intellectual heroes and models? Are they people who believe that God created the heavens and the earth, and that in Him we live and move and have our very being? Do they believe that God so loved this world that He gave His only begotten Son? Who are the people up front? Higher education is not just what you learn, but it's also who you learn from and who you learn with. Now, if you'll allow me to use the word magic in a good and a positive sense here, I think some of the magic at Harding University is what goes on among the students. That we gather a student body from all 50 states. We have students from 54 other countries. A lot of these people grew up feeling a little conspicuous and alone. And some of them, there was a girl from San Diego a few years ago who discovered us on the internet. She had no family connections with Harding at all. Discovered us on the internet. And she told me that she felt growing up that she was often the only person in the room who was asking the question, is this right? And it's a lonely place to be. And she wanted to go to college somewhere where she had people around her who cared about what does God think about this and what is right in this matter. So you gather people from all 50 states and 54 other countries and you bring them together in Searcy, Arkansas, where you have to learn to make your own fun. And you bring them together in Searcy, Arkansas, and great things begin to happen. I think that some of the most incredible spiritual formation on the Harding campus takes place at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. People sitting on the side of their bed in their dorm room talking about the will of God in their lives and what's right and what's wrong and what do we do with our lives and making the decisions about the trajectory for the rest of their lives. I think some of the greatest spiritual formation. I love the administration. I'm a biggest fan of the faculty. But when it's all said and done, the people that I think maybe are making the biggest difference in the lives of young men and women at Harding are other young men and women at Harding who have the same sort of passion for God. So higher education, not just what you learn. It is that, but it's not just that. It's also who you learn from and who you learn with. Okay, I've given you plenty of time to think about what you want to talk about. So what kind of questions do you have for me this morning? I'm going to find out who the boldest people in this class are real quickly when you ask me a question. Yes. Online opportunities. We are not a full-blown online program yet, but we're making some important steps in that direction. In the last couple of years, we have begun building our liberal arts core. I realize that there is a different language in college, and not everybody speaks that language. A chairman of our board right now came from the Boot Heel of Missouri, was a sharecropper's son, and when he started at college, he sat down with his advisor the first day, and the advisor asked him, said, how many hours do you want to take? And he said, well, I think my daddy expects me to go all day. And so even the idea about academic hours is sort of different language and everything. But online, Harding has said the core of who we are is that we are a residential program for 18 to 22-year-olds who are making that transition from high school into career. That's still the heart and soul of what Harding is. Recent years, last 10 years or so especially, we've gotten into allied health. And so we have a doctorate in pharmacy. We have a doctorate in physical therapy. We have a master's in physician assistant, a master's in communication sciences and disorders. We've had an MBA in the business field for a long time, and we've had a master's in education that, I don't know if anybody in the state has more superintendents with degrees from their institution than Harding does. We've been in that field for a long time. The MBA is fully online, so that's available. our undergraduate liberal arts core is coming online. We just approved this last week that you can get, for years we've had a program for non-traditional students. Non-traditional means 24 or older. You know, you get old really quick in a college context. But 24 or older, you're not the typical college age student. But we've had a program on campus since when I was a student there back in the 70s. We used to call it CCP, Training Preachers. Then it was SBS and CAMT. We love acronyms. And so we've had all of these things. Well, now we're realizing that it's increasingly difficult to get people to uproot their family and come for that kind of training. So that program has just this week gone online. So if for the 18 to 22-year-old, we are not an online school, and the reality is it is a rare 18 to 22-year-old who succeeds in online education. Online is a growing thing, but it is primarily for people in career and a little bit older. And that's one of the things that's kind of the untold story about all of the discussion about the online world. Now, at the same time, we are, like a lot of schools, we are moving in the direction of where your on-ground students will be in an online class. And we haven't made that step yet, but we're in the process of it. But we've built our liberal arts classes, which people used to call gen eds, or the required classes, or the get them out of your way class, that those sorts of things are going online for summer school for us, especially right now. Did you have any questions in particular, or did I muddle around in that enough? Okay, thank you. Yes?
I've heard that when people get to a certain age, I don't think 60, 62, is it 50% off or free education?
Next question. I am nothing that I know of like that.
No auditing courses that are available for older people?
Call campus and find out. I tell people all the time, if you have a question, call me. I don't know many answers at all, but I know who does, and so let me know. But that's not a big thing that I know of. Yeah.
What's the size of the freshman class average now, and where do the majority of them come from?
Okay. The size of the freshman class and where do they come from? We are somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,100. That's sort of our sweet spot of recruiting. And they come from all 50 states. About 30%, just under 30%, come from the state of Arkansas. So even though we are a national and international school, we're still very much an Arkansas school. And so what happens with things like the Arkansas Challenge Scholarship and all, those sorts of things affect us significantly. But our student body, all 50 states, 30% roughly from the state of Arkansas. Our students are about 70, usually between 72 and 74% from the churches of Christ. And so the remainder will be, all over the map as to what those might be. We have 60 students on campus that are a part of what's called the Walton Scholars Program that's funded by the Walton Family Foundation, originally started by Sam Walton himself. And that brings 15 students from Central America, just the best and the brightest, to campus every year. And that is a full scholarship for them because they make a commitment that they will go home for 4 years after their education. Because of that, they are sent home every Christmas break and every summer break. And so all of those things are paid for. So we have that. We have about 150 Chinese students on our campus, which is one of the great stories and kind of great ironies of Harding University, is that most people know that George Benson, our second president, was a missionary in China, was there during the communist takeover. He became a strong anti-communist for the rest of his life, and now Harding University, where he came back to and was president for 29 years, Harding University receiving Chinese students is kind of a strange sort of a thing. So that gives you an idea of just kind of what makes up the student body. Yes?
Yeah, we're the students from Harding right now, by me. Rebecca Burrows is from T, South Dakota. Sarah Pierce is from Columbia, Tennessee. And John Spicer is from Sulphur, Louisiana. So these are 3 Harding students. There may be others here. And then I'd love to see who the alumni are.
Okay, great questions. When we take this show on the road, when we have Harding receptions, and when I get up and speak, I tell people now, my first year as president, what I learned is I am the warm-up act for the students. Because at a reception, that's who the 17-year-olds want to hear from. Is that, when they hear me, all they hear is gray hair. That is all they hear, And when they hear them, it's like, they know what's going on. So if you want to know what's going on, talk with them. Current Harding students who are in the group this morning, would you raise your hands? Do we have some others? Okay. Okay. He found out it's free, and so he's going to sign up. Yeah. Okay. Harding alumni who are here. Oh, wow. Just hold your hands up for the rest of my time here, okay? That's just, that is marvelous. Thank you. Thank you. People who've, it is great to be at Harding, and it's great to, I'm fascinated by people, especially young students who've not maybe known us before, and they go off and they do an internship. Someone was telling me their internship was down in San Antonio, Texas, and they went down there, and it was like everywhere they turned, it was either a Harding alum or somebody said, we love to hire Harding students. And they thought, how big is this place? That there were just, there are unbelievable Harding connections. Yes? Okay, Liz has a camera and Facebook. And so she needs a picture of those hands in the air of Harding alumni. Would you raise those again? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Yes?
What are some of the new developments on Harding?
New developments, particularly in terms of what? Okay. Okay. In terms of construction, a couple of, it was last year at the beginning of the year, the Gaines Athletics Center is now renamed. We kept the GAC, and the Gaines Athletics Center became the Gaines Activities Complex, and there was about a $4 million redo of all of that, and it's now a student recreation center that is state-of-the-art. It's wonderful, has a second floor, walking track and all. That's a part of things. You mentioned the football facility. We're about to break ground on an indoor football facility, which I need to back up just a bit when I say that, because my first week as president of Harding, I went to Nashville for the Christian Scholars Conference. And there's always a panel of Christian college presidents there. And Royce Money, who was president of ACU for a long time and had retired a couple of years earlier, but he was subbing for the president on this panel that day. And he made a statement that day, and here I am, a rookie president, and he made the statement that one of his greatest regrets in his time as president is that he could never convince the faculty that the new turf on the football field didn't come out of their budget. And he said somebody wanted to buy some turf, and it was either going to go there or it was going to go to TCU. So there is a gift, a $3 million gift that has just been made to the university by a family whose son played football at Harding, and they believe that it changed his life. And when they went and they talked to the family, and Dr. Burks and Coach Huckabee and our current coach, Paul Simmons, was there. And when they were, before they finished talking that day, my understanding was everybody in the room was crying. It meant a great deal to them. We originally asked them for $2.25 million. They got back in touch with us and said, we're not going to do $2.25 million. We'll do $2.5 million. And we'll also match $500,000 from football alumni. And so it's going to be an indoor practice facility for football. It wasn't in the strategic plan. It's not money coming from anything else. It's coming from people who have a passion for that because of their son. And Harding's just, we went to the semifinals in football this year. And the year before, we went to the quarterfinals. And we were there, and we played a great game. Not this year, the year before. We played a great game and got beat 35-0. And it was one of those where you thought, I'm proud of these folks. We're just proud to be here. This year we went, and we belong there. And so I'm not going to say we'll win the national championship in a year or two, but we're going to win the national championship in a year or two. And but that's one of the things that's being built right now. Nothing else on the board immediately for the university. Nothing has been approved by the Board of Trustees yet. Harding Academy is in the middle of an expansion there, and so if you're on campus, you'll see that there's a new elementary wing that's being built over there. That's a $6 million project that we're in the middle of right now. Yes, one more question.
You mentioned the percentage of the Church of Christ students. I think that the Chronicle had an article, or I read somewhere, where most of our colleges are losing their percentages are going down. So that's an impressive number. What do you attribute to that?
It's an impressive number, and more than anything else, it is it's the confidence of the churches. I don't think that Harding has anything more precious than the trust of the churches. And I think that's something that we regard as being very, very important. And people want their sons and daughters to have the experience that they had. It's where a lot of that comes. Some people are discovering us and finding they want this experience for themselves. So it's, I think more than anything else, that people look to us and see us as loving the church and wanting our students to live in service to God and to the church. And I think that's where that percentage comes from. And we watch that very, very closely. Well, I think I've gone to my time, and so thank you all very much. And you'll be hearing my voice again in a little bit.